The delivery men open the large box, revealing the NDR series humanoid robot called Andrew. Andrew is introduced to perform housekeeping and maintenance duties. Richard quickly uses the remote to activate Andrew, who immediately introduces himself. At that point, Richard's eldest daughter, Grace, despises Andrew, but her younger sister, Amanda, is sympathetic to Andrew. Andrew shows an entertaining presentation of the 3 laws of robotics. The first law is that the robot may not injure a human being. The second law is that the robot must obey all orders given by human beings unless those orders contradict the first law. The third law is that the robot must protect itself unless its protection violates the first 2 laws. Afterwards, Richard takes Andrew to the basement where Andrew connects to a power outlet and spends the night charging his power. The following day, Grace and Amanda go to school while Richard leaves for work. They leave Andrew with Richard's wife, Rachel, who begins to feel uncomfortable with Andrew's presence. As a result, she orders Andrew to clean out the basement all day. That night, Andrew cooks dinner for the family, but Grace and Samantha do not seem to appreciate him. After dinner, Grace calls for Andrew to go upstairs and orders him to jump out the window. Andrew follows her orders without questioning. Consequently, Richard finds Andrew slightly damaged and quickly calls his children to come downstairs. Richard reprimands them that even though Andrew is a robot, they must take care of him and treat him like an actual person. Grace and Samantha are sent off to bed, while Andrew goes down to the basement for self-repair. The next morning, the family goes to the beach where Andrew watches Amanda playing with her toys. When Amanda gives her favorite glass horse figurine to Andrew, he accidentally breaks it. Amanda gets angry and orders Andrew to leave her alone. Seeing driftwood nearby, Andrew comes up with an idea to make amends to Amanda. He gathers it and learns to carve by reading some books in the basement. Andrew eventually manages to carve a new wooden horse figurine and leaves it on Amanda's bed. The new figurine delights Amanda. In return, Amanda gives Andrew one of her dolls. During breakfast, Richard marvels at Andrew's creativity and ability to make the wooden figurine that he carved himself. Richard believes that Andrew was lying, but Andrew plainly replies that he could not lie unless he was ordered to. At night, Richard hears classical music playing from the basement. He follows the noise and finds Andrew listening on an old phonograph which he has fixed himself. The following morning, Richard takes Andrew to the robotics company that made him. Richard meets the CEO and inquires if Andrew's creativity was part of his programming. The CEO immediately claims that this is a problem and offers to scrap Andrew. Hearing this, Richard is annoyed by the offer and thinks that the CEO should see Andrew's eccentricities as important and unique, not as mistakes that need to be fixed. Despite the CEO's attempts to negotiate, Richard eventually turns down the offer and takes Andrew back home. On their way home, Richard makes changes to Andrew's workload. He will no longer just focus on housework, but spend time continuing his creativity and exploring other humanities. Over the next few days, Andrew spends his time making clocks similar to Richard's work. Not only that, he also spends time with Richard every night discussing about the ways of human life. Andrew ends up learning about humans, how they reproduce, how to understand humor, and how to tell jokes. While the family is having breakfast, Andrew reads them a series of inappropriate jokes. He also learns to play piano with help from Amanda. A few years later, Amanda has grown into a beautiful young woman. She has also grown closer to Andrew. On the other hand, Grace has bleached her hair and has entered her rebellious phase. Andrew has become a clockmaker, but all his clocks keep ringing every hour. Rachel says she cannot stand the noise anymore, so Richard comes up with an idea to sell the clocks that Andrew has made all along and keep the money. However, Amanda argues that the money should go to Andrew since he does all the work. Richard agrees, but reminds Amanda that she should not invest her feelings in Andrew because he is still a robot. After making a sizable fortune selling the clocks, Richard helps Andrew to open a bank account with the help of their family's lawyer. Richard ends up managing Andrew's fortune after they find that the robots have no rights under current laws. Later, Amanda surprises Andrew in his workshop, causing his finger to be severed. Luckily, Andrew assures her that his finger can be fixed. When Andrew continues his work, Amanda tells him that her boyfriend has asked her to marry him. However, she is unsure about it even though her boyfriend is a perfect man. At that moment, Amanda seems to have feelings for Andrew, but Andrew is unaware of her feelings because he is a robot. Andrew's frank talk eventually helps Amanda make the decision to marry Frank. Before she leaves, Amanda asks Andrew to be an usher at her wedding. Andrew happily accepts her invitation, and he is excited about wearing a tuxedo. Soon, Richard takes Andrew to the robotics company for repairs while bringing his lawyer. Richard warns the CEO if he tries to replace Andrew's coding, an alarm inside Andrew's body would be triggered. This would alert the police and potentially get the robotics company sued until bankruptcy. Meanwhile, Andrew asks the CEO if he can give him the ability to present facial expressions to match his emotions. The CEO says the upgrade would be extremely expensive, but Andrew has more than enough money in his bank account to pay the expenses. Knowing this, the CEO unavoidably agrees. Amanda's wedding takes place the next day, with Andrew acting as an usher. Andrew wears a tuxedo for the first time and greets Amanda with a smile on his new face. After the wedding reception, Andrew approaches Richard, who is sitting alone by the lake. Andrew shows the recording of Richard and Amanda dancing together using a projector in his head. Due to this situation, Richard gets emotional, thinking that he would be alone after his children move out of his house. 12 years later, Amanda has a son who is very hostile to robots, including Andrew. While they are lounging on the beach, Andrew suddenly asks Amanda how to obtain his freedom. Andrew does not want to leave the family or stop working for them, but on the other hand, he also wishes to be free to choose. Fortunately, Amanda understands him and decides to help Andrew talk to Richard. Later that night, Andrew approaches an elderly Richard and presents him with a check of all his money in exchange for his freedom. Wounded by this, Richard is upset and accuses Amanda of planting these ideas in Andrew's head. She reassures Richard that it happened naturally as Andrew continues evolving over time. The next morning, Richard returns the check to Andrew and grants him his freedom on the condition that he may no longer reside at Richard's home. With his newfound freedom, Andrew decides to live by the beach and ends up building his own wooden home. He lives alone for the next 16 years, learning more about the world. One day, Amanda visits Andrew's home and tells Andrew that Richard has asked him to come to his house. They go back to the house and find Richard lying on his deathbed. Richard finally admits that he was wrong and Andrew was right in asking for his freedom. He holds Andrew's hand and apologizes to him for banishing him before he dies. Following Richard's death, Andrew goes on a quest to find other NDR series robots similar to him. He talks to Amanda's son, who is now a lawyer, asking for his help in acquiring information on their locations. At that time, it turns out that Amanda has divorced her husband. Amanda's son eventually helps Andrew on the thought that Andrew will be gone for a long time and will no longer communicate with Amanda. Andrew appears to have won the case and starts traveling around the world searching for the surviving NDR series robots. Several years have passed and he still has not found any of them. During this time, he frequently communicated back to Amanda by writing letters to her about his journey. As he is about to end his journey, Andrew returns to San Francisco based on the news of an NDR series robot that has been rebuilt in the area. At a market, Andrew sees the robot from afar, which appears to be a female version of himself. He follows her to a building where he learns that her name is Galadia. At first, Andrew is enthusiastic about meeting a robot that has the same uniqueness as himself. However, he becomes disappointed when he learns that Galadia could do all these things because her personality chip is activated. Andrew meets Galadia's owner, Rupert, whose father was the original NDR designer. After he was laid off, Rupert's father started his own small robotics company, but he died shortly after that. Since then, Rupert has taken over the company and continues his father's research. Andrew learns from Rupert that Galadia is an ordinary NDR robot that has been modified with a female personality and traits. Rupert shows Andrew the results of their unfinished research. Most of the designs are made to help make the robots appear more human-like. Unluckily, Rupert is unable to continue his research because no one was willing to fund the research. Hearing this, a fascinated Andrew quickly offers to fund Rupert's research. In addition, he also agrees to be a test subject. Rupert tells him that it is an entirely external physical upgrade, meaning that Andrew's mechanical brain and metal skeleton remains the same. Andrew chooses a face design that resembles a 40-year-old man. After the procedure is completed, Andrew is very satisfied with his new look. Not long after that, Andrew finally returns to Amanda's home. When he enters the house, he sees a young woman who looks exactly like a young Amanda. Andrew greets her, but the young woman is afraid to see him. The real Amanda suddenly walks in. She has grown old and is initially puzzled to see Andrew, but soon recognizes him. Apparently, the young woman is Amanda's granddaughter, Portia. Andrew and Amanda talk for a while before Andrew returns to live in his wooden beach house. One rainy night, Andrew finds a dog on his porch and decides to adopt it. Sometime later, he visits Portia with his dog. After their first meeting, Portia seems to be cautious of Andrew. Andrew finally reveals that